Shall we make a start, Christina?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Fantastic. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the CAQDAS Networking Project's webinar series. I'm Sarah Bulloch, and I work at the CAQDAS Networking Project, which is based in sociology at the University of Surrey. And with me today is Christina Silver, the director of the CAQDAS Networking Project, and our speaker for today. And this is our first webinar of this academic year. Since we started the webinar series in 2020, we've held 50 sessions, in which researchers from around the world have shared research, knowledge, and experience around computer-assisted qualitative data analysis in a wide range of contexts. I'll share the link to our recordings of past webinars shortly in the chat. And this is our first webinar in a new extended format. So we're going to have an hour for the presentation and then 30 minutes for discussion. So let's have a little look at what the QuackDust Networking Project is up to other than that. So next slide. Thank you so much, Christina. We have some resources on our website, a very wide range of resources, and ones that we have recently started to add to are our QualAI pages that are really designed to support the thoughtful discussion around QualAI. And also our CAQDAS blog, which we welcome contributions to. We also have lots of training that we deliver, both online and face-to-face. So next slide, please. Thank you so much. So these are our upcoming courses up to December in a range of different softwares, but also on a range of different methodological issues. And do keep an eye on our website for more of those in the future. We also have another webinar scheduled, which is also on the next slide there, which is happening pretty shortly, and I'll remind you of that towards the end of our time together today. So we're really looking forward to that. But please, we are also looking for others to come and contribute to our webinar series. And so in a moment, once Christina gets chatting, we will send the link to how you can apply to come and speak on this webinar series. We really welcome contributions in a wide range of fields. So it'd be great to hear from you if you're interested in delivering a webinar for us. So now I'm going to present Christina, and that's what you're all here for today. Christina's been using and teaching qualitative data analysis software packages for over 20 years and has taught thousands of researchers from all over the world. And she leads and directs the CAQDAS Networking Project at the University of Surrey. She's also director of Qualitative Data Analysis Services Limited, which undertakes research and provides training, analysis, and consultancy services for organizations and research teams. She's a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences as well. Christina has expertise in all of the major computer-assisted qualitative data analysis packages and is interested in the relationship between qualitative mixed methodology and technology. Over the years, Christina has written many publications about CAQDAS, including a book called Using Software in Qualitative Research, a step-by-step guide with Anne Lewins, and 3 books entitled Qualitative Analysis Using Atlas TI or Max QDA or NVivo, the 5-level QDA method with Nicholas Wolff. Her recent scholarship has focused on the issue of AI in qualitative data analysis, and she has been collaborating with a very wide range of researchers and practitioners to consider implications and best practice in this very fast evolving field. Today, we're going to have the pleasure of hearing her thoughts on the most recent developments in this space, and I'm really looking forward to it, Christina. Whilst Christina's speaking, please do post any questions that you might have or comments that you have in the chat, and I'll collate these and put them to Christina after the talk. Christina, it's over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. And so hopefully now you can see my slide, which just says QualAI space.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is basically 2 things around the space of qualitative AI. And that's going to be what's occurring at the moment and why it matters. And I'm sure many of you know that there's a lot going on and there's lots of things to think about in terms of the implications. So that's really what I'm going to be focusing on. In terms of those two key topics, I'm going to first of all talk about what's happening in the space, what's occurring in the space from a technical perspective. So what's happening technically with AI in relation to qualitative research and analysis, and then also reflect a little bit on the methodological implications of those technical developments. And then I'll move on and start thinking about, well, now we know what's going on, why it matters. Why should we be thinking about this, debating this, considering this, and thinking about how it matters to us all. And I'm going to be doing that also in two ways. First of all, thinking about the ethical implications of why it matters, which are really, really important in the qualitative space. And then make a few comments also about the profession of qualitative research, because what's happening in the space is having an impact on how we go about doing things, and that matters as well. So the first broad comment I want to make is that actually I see an increasing schism happening in our field, okay? And I think that's really important to be aware of and to reflect on the implications of that. What I mean is that we have a large number of advocates of the use of AI for qualitative research, who are adopting new tools, writing about them and changing the way that they go about their research as a result. And on the other side, we also have a large group of skeptics. So we have qualitative researchers, academics, professionals who have their hands up in the air about what's going on and feel that this is not a good development that we're seeing. So we're definitely seeing a divide, a schism happening in the field. Alongside those two groups, I also observe a maybe larger group of researchers who are unsure about what's going on and what the implications of what's going on are. And so lots of people grappling with, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to think about? How does this impact the way that I might go about things? And I guess that some of you will see yourself sitting in one of those three groups. And actually, that's really where I want to start today and ask you, those of you that are here today live, whether you could let us know how you characterize your thoughts at this moment in time about using generative AI for qualitative analysis. So if you have got your phone in front of you, you can grab that QR code and that takes you to a Google form where you can just answer that one question very quickly. If you prefer, you can click on the link that I have put into the chat, which will take you to the same place. So I will just pause just for a moment to allow you all to do that. And it shouldn't take too long because it's simply one question and you can choose an answer. Whilst you're doing that, I will show you this pie chart here, which is the collective results of about 550 other researchers who've answered the same question over the last few months in the sessions that I've done. And you can see here from others, we've got quite a set of different responses. So 37% of previous researchers who've answered this question have said that they're quite excited about the potential of using generative AI for qualitative analysis. A quarter of people really excited, but actually quite a lot of people who are unsure or skeptical to one degree. And absolutely, I can see in the chat that some of you think that's very intriguing. I do as well, which is why I've asked you to answer the same question. So let's have a look and see what you have said. So this is the live results from those of you here today. About half of you have answered this question so far. Maybe we'll get a few more responses as others of you get there. And we can see that in a room of people coming to a webinar about the use of AI for qualitative research, there is some diversity in your gut feelings about this. And this is very, very similar to what I've seen over the last few years. So that's why these sessions hopefully are useful, because we can think about what's going on and discuss what's going on. And I really would like to open up for discussion today. Please do ask questions as they occur to you. I might see a few of them in the chat and answer them as they come up. But otherwise, as Sarah said, we will have plenty of space at the end, plenty of time at the end for discussion. Okay, so thanks a lot for that. What I find to be particularly interesting is that even the skeptical come to sessions around these topics, okay? So those who are skeptical or unsure about using AI are very open to finding out what's going on. And I think that's testament to our field more generally. Okay, so let me see if I can flick back to my slides. All right, so let's move on and think a little bit about the core topic today. And I want to start off by talking about what's happening in this space from a technical perspective, okay? And I'm going to do that by talking about a number of different things. So first of all, I'm going to reflect on traditions of computational support for qualitative data analysis and ground what's happening right now in that historical context. Alongside that will be a little bit of a discussion about what AI means and different types of AI tools, and I'll distinguish between traditional and generative AI tools in this space. Then I'll say a few words about large language models and the analytic capabilities that stem from them in terms of how we can undertake or enact qualitative data analysis. I will talk about what I see as an explosion of tools in this space and discuss different genres, 4 genres as I see them at the moment, of Gen AI tools in the CAQDAS space. And then I will also make some comments about how this is all changing the way or evolving the way that we engage with our qualitative practices in online spaces. So those are the first topics that I'm going to be talking about. All right, so let's start off with a little bit of history. So there are at least 3 core traditions of computer tools for analysing texts: computational linguistics and NLP, natural language processing, a text mining tradition, and then the interpretive qualitative analysis space, which is where the CAQDAS Networking Project sits largely. And these 3 traditions have been around for a long time. So around the 1980s, we started to see different kinds of software tools arise in these 3 different traditions. And initially, these 3 different traditions were quite separate from one another. So computational linguistics and natural language processing is all about how language works in text. So looking at kind of linguistic characteristics of text and those sorts of things. Text mining is about working with large volumes of text to pull out content. So content analysis sits in that space. And then the interpretive qualitative analysis space is where the software programs that we focus on predominantly that sit in that CAQDAS space developed from the similar sorts of time, the mid to late 1980s. So originally these were 3 separate traditions, and over time the boundaries between them have become somewhat blurred. But the point of making this little sort of historical comments today is that the use of tools and the use of AI is not something new. So supervised and unsupervised machine learning are types of AI, okay, which we have had available certainly in computational linguistics and text mining for a long time, and also in some of the CAQDAS packages that sit in that more interpretive qualitative analysis space. Okay, and that's why it's really important to be very clear about what we mean when we use the term AI. Okay, these days, I think when the term AI is used, most people mean the kind of AI that stems from the large language models and the generative AI capabilities. But that's not the only form of AI, and certainly in our space of computer-assisted qualitative analysis, that's just one type of AI. Okay, so one thing that I think is really interesting is to reflect on why it is now that these new generative AI capabilities are sparking lots of attention, when actually we had lots of other types of AI in our software that was maybe not being discussed as much as the generative AI. And that's something that's really important, I think. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a history lesson in terms of the interpretive qualitative analysis space. Okay, so the very first CAQDAS packages became available from the mid-1980s. So software programs like the Ethnograph, HyperResearch, Atlas TI, WinMax, which became MaxQDA, and Nudist, which became NVivo, they started being available from the mid-1980s. It would be really interesting to see in the chat how many of you have used some of those tools, okay? The point is that the 1980s is a long time ago now, and we have had computer assistants since that time. But between those early days, the mid-1980s, and around 1999, basically those software programs were not doing any analysis for us. They were essentially project management tools. They allowed us to store and manage our qualitative materials, and fundamentally store and manage our ideas about what was interesting and meaningful in those materials, so that we could access all of those thoughts, the data, and so on, and build our analysis. But for many, many years, myself, Sarah, and other colleagues at the CAQDAS Networking Project would always say the software is not doing the analysis is happening in your human interpretive brain. The software is just holding that for you so that you can access that. Okay, but that was only true really until around 1999, when we started to see the first, what are now sometimes referred to as the first intelligent CAQDAS programs. And some of you will be aware of sentiment analysis and other forms of supervised and unsupervised machine learning, like topic modeling and so on. And we started to see those kinds of capabilities coming into some of the CAQDAS packages from that time. And actually, in terms of coding, qualitative coding, we had a program that doesn't exist anymore, actually, called Qualrus. In 2002, Qualrus was released. And that was a program that would assist you with your qualitative coding using natural language processing capabilities, such that when you selected some text, the software would suggest a code based on the words in the selected text. And you could say, yes, that's a good code, and apply it. Or you could say, no, that's not what I think is meaningful about this text. Don't apply it. And the software would learn based on your decisions around how to code. And then next time when you selected some text which was similar, it would suggest or not codes based on earlier choices. So that's a form of supervised machine learning, whereby the software is learning from your human decisions around how to code qualitative materials. And that was available from 2002 until that software was no longer developed. And that's a long time ago now, 2002, 24 years ago. Okay, so we have had assistance with our qualitative analysis for a long time. Okay, this is not actually new. The discussions we're having might be more urgent, there might be more interest, there might be more concern, but actually we've had these sorts of capabilities for a very long time. So between 1999 and November 2022, when everything changed fundamentally with the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, between those time points, 1999 and 2022, CAQDAS packages, NVivo, Atlas TI, MaxQDA, and all of the others that I'm sure many of you are aware of. WebQDA, I can see in the chat there as well. There's many of them. As you know, they started to incorporate those different programs selected of these kinds of tools. So those programs were giving us assistance beyond managing and storing our own analysis. But since November 2022, we have seen a massive increase in interest in computer-assisted qualitative analysis as a result of the capabilities of large language models and how the tools are being developed in relation to that. And the key things that we've seen are literally a plethora, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of new online apps becoming available that harness those generative AI capabilities, and also increasing number of integrations of generative AI functionality into existing CAQDAS packages. And I'm going to talk about some of those things in a moment. But I do think that it's really important that we ask ourselves the question, why is it that there are so many of us here today when if I had done a session 5 years ago about computer assistance, I would have had far fewer people coming to a webinar. I know that because we used to do it. So what is it about what's going on now that piques your interest? Okay, and being able to answer that question, each of us individually and maybe on an organizational level where you work, is actually a really important thing to be able to do. Okay, the other thing that's really, really important is this question. So I'd like to hear in the chat a yes or a no in answer to this question. Do you think that you really know what large language models are and how they work in the context of thinking about doing qualitative analysis? Give me a yes or a no. Okay, a few yeses with some maybes, but quite a lot of no's and a few ishes, sort of. Okay, so let's stop with that for now. And I'm going to ask you another question, which is, do you think you ought to know what LLMs are and how they work before you use them for your qualitative analysis? Okay. I haven't seen a no. Okay. One more question then. Do you think people are using large language models and their capabilities for qualitative analysis without really knowing how they work? Okay. One more question. Is that a problem? Okay, lots of yeses. All right, so today I'm not here to teach you that, okay? But if you're one of the people that said that you weren't really very sure, okay, you probably ought to find out, okay, before you decide to use these capabilities. I'll just make a couple of pertinent points. The first one is that large language models are language models, okay? They are not knowledge models. They do not know the truth of anything. They are language models, and they work based on statistical probability. Okay, so they have a quantitative underlying premise. Okay, so ask yourself the question whether that aligns with your qualitative needs. Okay, statistical probability in terms of the prediction of the next most likely word. So let me ask you another question. Who's used something like ChatGPT or any of the equivalent kinds of chatbots? Okay, so you ask a question and you get a response. Okay, the response might be incorrect, right? We know the term hallucination probably. Okay, the idea that the large language model may make things up because it's not a knowledge model, okay, because it's generating a response based on statistical probability in relation to the data that it's being trained on, okay. So that's a very brief and not very technical description of how they work. If you want a more technical but very understandable explainer, then I would recommend that you click on this link. I will click on it quickly now and go there. This is an explainer from the Financial Times website. Let me just pop that in the chat if anyone wants to check it out later. I wouldn't check it out now. You need to spend a little bit of time. But here it explains the transformer technology, which is what underlies the power of generative AI and how the large language models work. There are other places you can find out more about this, but this I think is a really easy way in to thinking about it in the first place. Okay, so what I really want to focus on is thinking about what the capabilities are for us as qualitative researchers that stem from large language models and these generative AI tools that are developed from them, okay? And for me, there are 5 broad capabilities, okay? The capability to generate, to converse, to summarize, to convert, and to label. Okay, so what do these all mean in the context of our qualitative research needs? So first of all, generate, that's all about creating new things. So that's the generate from generative AI, that it creates something new, okay? And qualitative researchers can and are using that capability to get ideas for their projects and also to create data. Okay, and I'll come back to those things shortly. Then we've got the converse capability. And so that's the conversational dialogue, ask a question, get a response capability. And so qualitative researchers can ask questions about their data in a platform via that kind of chat interface, okay? Then we've got the summarize capacity. Large language models are good at taking amounts of text and reducing them down, condensing that down based on the form of the material. Then we've got the convert capability. So converting is turning one thing into another. So give me a yes or a no in the chat. Have you ever asked a large language model to create an image? So make me an image of a donkey eating an apple sitting on a cloud or something silly. Yes, okay. What you're doing there is you're using the convert capability, converting text, a textual prompt, into an image. Okay. What the convert capability, how that manifests itself in qualitative research is principally turning audio or video recordings into written text, form of transcription. Yeah. So the other way around, turning an audio or a video into text. And then labeling. So I'm calling this labeling rather than coding because I see it as being a different task from how we understand qualitative coding from a methodological point of view. But large language models, or the capabilities that are harnessed or drawn from them, can allow us to tag data and categorize content in a variety of different ways. Okay. All right. So let me move on and break this down a little bit. for you. Okay, and first of all, I want to do that by talking about the genres of generative AI for qualitative analysis. Okay, and at the moment, I see there as being 4. Okay, so on the right-hand side, we've got general purpose tools, ChatGPT, Claude, all of those sorts of things, Perplexity, and so on, that are not designed for qualitative research or qualitative analysis purposes, but can be used or are being used for them. Okay. Then we've got the new online apps that I mentioned earlier, and there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens. In my opinion, far too many than will ever survive. The market is oversaturated with new apps. So bear that in mind if you're deciding to use one of them, because it might not last the course. They're also not all being developed by qualitative researchers. Okay, there's lots of new self-proclaimed experts who are developing software who don't appear to have very much understanding of what qualitative research and analysis actually is. So be aware of that when you're thinking about which of those you might use. Then we've got the CAQDAS integrations. So that's the established qualitative software programs that are starting to integrate these new capabilities into their existing suite of a whole load of other capabilities. And then we've got bespoke in-house tools. So some organizations are developing their own tools that are only available to the staff who work at those organizations for particular applications or particular tasks which are related to qualitative research in some way. So the UK government, for example, is doing that, and various other organizations. Okay, so we don't have access to those unless you work for one of those organizations. All right, so let me move on and talk about what's occurring methodologically. I want to talk about the actual specifics of the tools in relation to the methods. Why? Because I believe that we should be using tools to enact methods rather than using tools just because they're there to be used. Okay, so I want to ground the more specific technical capabilities in the methodological context. And I'm going to do that by looking at 4 things. These 2 are related. So thinking about the use of those generative AI tools throughout the qualitative research workflow. So thinking about, okay, how can tools be used at different stages of our research process? And then also via that idea of a workflow, discuss the core implementations and capabilities in terms of qualitative data analysis. And then also start reflecting a little bit and discussing with you later on, no doubt, what this means for our practices and the debates in the field. So how are these tools changing the way that methods are being enacted? And what new skills might we need to develop if we're going to use these tools for methodologically grounded purposes? And then in terms of debates, there's lots of debate about whether we should be using these tools in the first place, as well as how we should be using them if we do decide to use them. And for me, a lot of that is to do methodologically with the status of interpretation. What are we doing when we're doing qualitative analysis? Okay, and the extent to which we believe that large language models and generative AI tools can actually do that or not. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the qualitative research workflow then. So here is just a general workflow. This is a high-level general workflow. Depending on the analytic method that you are using, you may do things slightly differently, but generally we design our project. We may need to do a literature review to inform the generation of research objectives and questions, for example. We may need to collect some materials, gather some data in some way, either through primary data collection or using secondary materials and so on. We may need to transcribe those materials if they're not naturally occurring in transcribed form. And then the core aspects of the analysis process come into their own, familiarizing with our data, categorizing our data, capturing the meaning, what's going on in our data, and the factual characteristics about our data and how everything is connected. And then we interpret what that all means, and then in some way we communicate our findings either in written form or in various other forms. So as a general workflow, that's what we generally do. And what I want to reflect on now is how those 5 core generative AI capabilities that I mentioned earlier map on to those stages of that general qualitative research workflow. And this is how I think about that at the moment. On the right-hand side here, you can see those general qualitative stages, and on the left-hand side, the capabilities. And this Sankey diagram really is more about the idea that the capabilities have potential role at several stages of the process, rather than exactly where the lines go to and from. Okay, every time I look at this, I think, I could maybe adjust where the lines go to and from. That detail doesn't really matter in terms of the general principle that there is not a one-to-one match between the capabilities that generative AI provides us and the stages of the workflow. There's lots of overlap there. All right, so I just want to break that down a little bit more. Before I do that, I would be really interested to know who and how many people have used generative AI for these different stages of the qualitative workflow. Can you let me know in the chat? So if you've used it, so some of you are saying no, that's fine. If you have, can you let me know which stage or stages you have used generative AI for? It's interesting to know. Transcription, writing, transcription, reviewing, okay. Question development, interrogating, brainstorming, familiarizing, okay. Okay, so there's a range of different uses that some of you have put these capabilities to. So let's have a little bit of a think about this in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to take each of these stages and just say a few things about tools more concretely. So in terms of design, researchers are using chatbots like ChatGPT and so on for ideation, to get ideas. So you can ask, I'm doing a project about volunteering, and I need to get some ideas for useful research questions in the context of whatever the context might be, and using it to brainstorm to get ideas for designing a project. And you can do that using general purpose tools like chatbots, or the newer and more powerful deep research tools as well. In terms of reviewing, we're starting to see existing reference managers incorporate via add-ins generative AI capabilities, and we're also seeing many more than I've got listed here, new AI tools designed to facilitate literature reviews. Some of them will find literature, some of them will summarize literature, some of them you can use as analytic tools as well. Then we start to get slightly more controversial. in terms of the use of AI to collect qualitative materials. And there's two groups that I want to talk about here. So using AI as interviewers, and that can happen in text form, or using AI bots. And then also using or creating what's referred to as silicone or synthetic data. So not actually gathering data from real humans, but asking models to create data. I'm doing a project on this and I need 20 transcripts of interviews using this interview guide. Give me some examples of hypothetical people with these characteristics and what they might say. Okay. And that's also happening in various contexts. I'm interested to hear in the chat whether people have heard about that before and what your gut feelings are about that, or indeed if anyone's been doing it. Not real research, someone says. Ethical issues. Data slop. Okay, there's normally quite a lot of concerns here. We can maybe discuss in the time at the end about some situations when it might be appropriate, and I can give you some examples of how it's been used in different contexts. But this is definitely what I'm observing as being the most controversial application at the moment. Then we've got transcription. Many of you mentioned transcription before. Give me an adjective. Well, who's done transcription themselves? Who has listened to an audio in the past and typed it up yourself? Lots of you, I'm sure. Okay, fabulous. Give me an adjective then in the chat for how you feel when you remember that experience. Painful, time-consuming, exhausting, intense, tedious, useful, but time-consuming. So it's not only time-consuming, it's also part of the analytic process, yes, part of that familiarization process. For many, many years, I would say that automated transcription, which has been around for a long time, okay, wasn't really going to save you very much time, because by the time you've been through and corrected all the mistakes it's made, you're not going to save very much time. So therefore you probably only would use it if you had some practical reason why you couldn't do the transcription yourself. But that has fundamentally changed. If you need a verbatim transcript these days, either using a general purpose tool, using things like Teams and Zoom that will automatically create transcripts for you these days, or via bespoke transcription tools developed by qualitative software programs. Atlas TI, NVivo, MaxQDA, Quercus and Transana now do that. They are very accurate, okay? But maybe not always what you need, right? Because you don't always need a verbatim transcript. Sometimes you're interested in the non-verbal interaction or the intonation of how something is said, rather than just that it is said, okay? So you do lose something by gaining some time back with automated transcripts. But there's been a massive step change in the technology there recently. In terms of analysis, so I see the familiarize, categorize, interrogate, and interpret stages as the core analytics stages, if you like. We have got those 4 genres I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to focus on the integrations into existing tools and the new apps in the forthcoming slides a little bit. And then finally, we have that stage of communicating, so telling the world what you found out through your qualitative research. And of course, we've got a range of AI writing tools, and I did see in the chat earlier that a few of you had mentioned using some of those already. Some of them are, again, integrated into other platforms, but there are also bespoke writing tools. So really the point is here, and we haven't got time to go into all of the detail about all of the different kinds of tools or types or actual tools within the programs today. But the point of this is that it is possible, and has been for a while, to do a whole qualitative research project from the beginning to the end using generative AI capabilities, okay? With minimal or maybe even no human oversight or intervention, okay? And that is what I have written about previously as being, well, what I refer to as qualitative deepfake, the fact that a whole project can be done with AI, automated by AI. And if we as researchers are not thinking about what that means for the field of qualitative research and how to react or respond to that, then we absolutely should be. You've probably heard of examples of articles getting through peer review that have been undertaken using AI with and therefore having a whole load of issues with them. Okay. So I'm sure some of you will be interested in the specific capabilities, okay? And I'm going to be talking about the bespoke AI tools, okay? So if you remember those 4 genres, the 2 on the outside, I'm not focusing on. 1, because the bespoke in-house tools we don't have access to. On the other end, the general purpose tools, they are not designed for qualitative research or qualitative analysis. So I'm going to be talking about the tools which are designed for qualitative analysis that are leaning on these generative AI capabilities. We can talk about the general purpose ones later on, and I can give you some of my insights into when they might be useful or not later. But for now, I'm talking about these integrations into existing tools, and these are the ones that do that at the moment, and the new apps. And basically, there are 3 kind of core groups of specific capabilities. We have summarization, we have chatting or conversing, and we have coding. So let's break that down a little bit. So in terms of summarization, okay, we can have generative AI summarize documents, data files, okay, which might be an interview transcript or a focus group transcript or a piece of literature or whatever it might be, mainly text at the moment. We're starting to see summarization of images, but that's fairly rudimentary at the moment. We can also, in bespoke tools, ask for selected segments of data to be summarized of our choice. We can also, if we're working in a tool that enables us to code, we can have coded segments summarized. So if you've already done some coding across multiple data files, then you can have the AI summarize those coded segments, which is very, very different from summarizing a document. And then a kind of a form of summarization is in some tools you have the explanation functionality. So this might be useful, for example, if you're reading a piece of literature and you've come across a theory or a concept or something that you're not familiar with, a technical term maybe, then you can ask the AI to give you an explanation of what that technical term means, or local idioms in participant data maybe. And that can be a quicker way to sense check something than going and finding it out yourself. But of course, it might be giving you hallucinations, so you need to check that later. But those are the core summarization applications at the moment. Then I'm going to talk about coding. So we have code suggestions. So similar to what I mentioned earlier in that program Qualrus from all of those years ago, we can select a piece of text and have the AI suggest potential codes to us, or indeed do that from an already existing code, whereby the AI will look at the coded segments that have already been put inside that code and suggest subcodes, ways that you might break down a broader body of coding. Then we've got actual coding that can happen in a number of different ways, inductively and deductively, depending on which tool you're using. So inductive AI coding is when you ask the AI to look at your texts and to decide what's there that needs coding and to do the coding. And you can do that in an automated way, i.e. just tell the AI to go off and do it, or you can do it in a directed way, so prompt it to look for specific things. And then deductive AI coding is when you have a concept that's represented as a code with a definition, and then you say to the AI, I want to find just extracts that match this code label and this definition, and then it will go and find them. So those are different applications of coding. In addition to that, we've kind of got the automated theme generation, so not actually capturing data in a coding way, but looking at large amounts of data and generating higher level themes from that material. But summarization and coding are analytic tasks that some of us may have done in the past before generative AI came into play, and I'm sure you can let me know in the chat if you have, or you would normally summarize your data or code your data. But in the middle here, this idea of chatting with our data, or conversing, I called it earlier, is this new capability, the fact that we can ask questions directly of our data and have the AI generate a response. And again, depending on which tool we're using, we can chat with one or more data file or text. We can chat with coded segments. And we can sometimes have comparative chatting. So we can ask a question and it will give us an answer based on groups of respondents maybe, or groups of data files, or according to each data file in a comparative way. So that's the kind of capability that is more new and different from what we've been able to do previously. Those of you that are interested might like to just reflect on this little timeline. So at the bottom here, I've just mapped on the months when the established qualitative software programs that so far have started to integrate this kind of capability began to do that. Transana is the most recent one. I don't think it's actually live yet. But you can find out. There is a video on the Transana YouTube from just last week where the developer's talking about how it works. I don't think it's actually available more broadly yet. But across the top, these are just the 5 that I happen to know best of the new online apps. So CoLoop, AI Lies, Reveal, Q Insights, and Tailwind. They didn't exist before early 2023, but as I mentioned earlier, there are literally dozens and dozens of others. Many of them are coming out of the more market research sector rather than the academic or government social research sector. But AI Lies is developed by James Go, who gave our last webinar actually, who studied at MIT. Q Insights is developed by Susanna Frieser, who some of you I'm sure will know, who's a long-standing qualitative methodologist, and Tailwind is developed by MaxQDA. So MaxQDA have integrated generative AI into their main program and developed a new app as well. But as I said, there are many, many more. These are just the ones I happen to know best at the moment. All right, I'm aware that I'm running out of time, and I haven't got on to the second topic yet. So that's okay in terms of time, because really I wanted to open up the discussion about why this matters with you as a group. So I'll go through what I wanted to raise fairly quickly, and then we'll open up for discussion. So I want to just say what the 5 core topics are: the development of large language models, is really important in terms of ethics. I'm sure many of you know that there is human exploitation involved in developing large language models in the first place. There is a massive environmental impact in terms of the development of large language models as well, and the kind of issues with the commercialization from the big tech companies, and all of that is being referred to as techno-colonialism in some quarters. And so along with the impacts of our use, so how much energy and water and so on does it actually cost to use these models, the environmental impact is something to consider, and also the societal impacts, because the impacts of the use of large language model are not equal across the world. So that's really important, and we need to think as researchers, as qualitative researchers who are interested in meaning and interpretation and human behavior. As social researchers, we need to question whether these issues align with our values as social researchers, which is something I've spoken about recently quite a lot. Then we've got that issue of qualitative deepfake that I mentioned earlier. And in terms of research ethics, the quality of qualitative data analysis may be questioned as a result of the use of these capabilities. I'm also very interested in this issue of interpretation. Okay, if we are in the business of interpreting meaning, do we believe that large language models can actually do that? Okay, and if we don't, then why are we using them to help us with that task? That's something that we need to consider. And the role of generative AI in our process. So are we seeking, through our use of these tools, for the AI to replace something that we don't want to do or can't do or aren't very good at, like transcription maybe? Or are we seeking the AI to assist us with something? So we're not asking it to take over something, but we're asking it to help us, like we might if we were working with a co-worker. And lots of researchers think of AI in those sorts of terms. In my experience, the biggest ethical issue that comes up from qualitative researchers is the data security issue. That's probably the most frequent question I get asked. Okay, and there's three things to think about. What happens to the data when it goes from wherever it is on your computer to wherever it needs to go for the AI to do its thing? Okay, how safe is it in transit? Who has access to it and how long do they have access to it for? Okay, that's data retention. And then is it used to train the models or not? Okay, so those are the three key things that concern a lot of qualitative researchers. So that has to be fully understood, of course. And for many people, that's a reason not to use these tools. And then something which I think is also really important in terms of ethics for qualitative research, which I don't see being discussed as much, is the idea of what informed consent really now is. So we are used to asking participants, if we're gathering data from or with participants, for their informed consent to use their words or feelings or opinions in our outputs and so on. But there doesn't seem to be very much discussion about whether we should be asking them whether they're okay if we process their data using AI or not. And I think that's something that we should be thinking about. Do we have the right to use generative AI? Whose data is it? And if our participants say, I don't want you to use AI to help you analyze what I've told you, then, well, I think we shouldn't be doing it. But I know there are differing opinions about that. So that's definitely something to consider. In terms of the profession, just to bring up a few things, I've mentioned earlier the understandings of AI. Okay, don't just say AI, be specific about what type of AI you mean. Okay, because if you just say I used AI, it doesn't mean anything to anyone. Okay, we have to be much more specific terminologically. And we should be good at that as qualitative researchers, because in the qualitative research space, terms mean very, very different things in different contexts. So think about the types of AI tools you're using at different stages, broadly distinguishing between the traditional and the generative. I haven't talked about the traditional AI tools today. I've been talking about the generative AI tools, but we could have a session like this about traditional AI tools as well. The understandings of AI are really important for the field. I've seen quite a lot of stuff written when it's just talking about AI, but I don't know what that means unless you tell me what you've been using. Then we've got this idea in terms of the status of the profession, this idea that anything goes, that I'm seeing around the place a little bit. If anyone can do qualitative research now, because anybody can use ChatGPT or whatever general purpose tool they might have access to, does that mean that anyone can do qualitative research? And if so, what does that mean for us as professionals? And in relation to that, I think we need to ask the question, what problem are we seeking to solve through using AI? Then also the analytic capabilities, as mentioned throughout this, we need to think about very clearly about which parts of the analytic process or which parts of the broader qualitative research process we're happy to hand over to AI or not, and how that affects what we actually do in practice. Then this whole idea of explosion and the genres of different tools. I don't think we can put our heads in the sand in terms of what's happening in the space. So being aware of what's going on, I'm observing quite a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. I get the sense, and in fact, I've heard lots of people say, I need to learn about these tools because I need to know what's going on and I don't want to be left behind. And I would question whether the fear of being left behind is a good reason to use a tool or not, and whether we need to be a bit more thoughtful about why we're using the tools. Are we using them just because they're there? I'm not sure that that's a good reason to use a tool, personally. And then authorship. Is it our work if AI is contributing in some way? But also in terms of quality, the black box effect is really important. So depending on where you sit on the methodological spectrum, you might be coming from a more kind of positivist space, where intercoder agreement and replicability and so on are really important. And there is none of that when you're using generative AI, because it's generating responses. So you're not necessarily going to get the same answer every time. And that may matter methodologically. Authenticity. So whose work is it? How do we know what's going on? And then this issue of guidelines. At the moment, we haven't got very many guidelines. So that's something that we need to consider also. All right, so this is my final main content slide before I open up for discussion, which is for us to think collectively as a community of practice about where we go from here. And there's kind of 4 things that I'm bringing up today. I'm sure you can think of some others. Some of these I've mentioned along the way. But we definitely should be questioning why. What's the problem you're seeking to solve through the use of generative AI? You need to be able to answer that question, I think. Why are you automating certain tasks now if you weren't automating those tasks previously? Because maybe you could have automated those tasks in the past. Why are you deciding to do it now when you weren't deciding to do it previously? Be able to answer that question. Understand the capabilities of the actual technology, the underlying large language models, and also the specifics of the tools that are harnessing those capabilities, which I haven't talked about in detail today. But if you come to some of our training courses, then we do that. Talk and teach. Okay, don't stick your head in the sand, even if you decide you don't want to use these tools for whatever reason. Share the reasons for that with others. As you saw from the pie chart earlier on, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and as a community we need to discuss these issues. There's lots of very strong opinions on both sides of the argument, and we need to be able to discuss that together in order to understand and think about what's going on. And we need to equip researchers who are coming up now with the capacity to make informed choices. It really worries me the amount of methods teachers I see saying we say there's no AI, we're not talking about AI with our students. Students are using AI whether teachers want them to or not. And I think we do a massive disservice to not equip them to make informed choices. That's my kind of main interest moving forward. And then exercise agency. We do have agency as researchers. Most of the qualitative software developers who have at their heart in developing their tools the good of the field really want to know what you think about their tools. They really want to have feedback so that they can develop tools which are really useful. And so we have agency to make the choice not to use these tools if that's what we decide. But we also have the agency to use tools when we think that they are relevant, but also to tell the developers what we want, what we don't want, and why, in order to collectively move forward these debates. Okay, so that's enough for me. So I'm now going to stop talking and open up for discussion. Sarah, I know there was lots of questions, but I couldn't keep on top of them, but hopefully you've managed to collate some of them.
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Christina, for that. It's raised lots of questions as well as giving lots of information for those of us who are really new to this area. So yes, thank you so much, everybody, for the questions in the chat. Christina does have a little follow-up question for you that she's going to post in the chat about your feelings in regard to that question that she posed at the beginning. So just a little final end of session question about how you feel about the use of AI in your work. But I'm also going to move on to some questions from participants now, Christina. So we have a couple of questions that are technical questions, and then we have some questions that are more sort of thinking questions, conceptual questions. So we'll start with the technical ones, and it may be that Christina points us to some answers, but we may also be gathering some other resources we can point you to in the future as well around them. So a few of the technical questions were to do with whether you've got any suggestions for how best to learn to be a better prompt creator. Have you come across any useful resources around that? Have you had any examples of where GenAI is used to clean up data? And if so, how? So let's start with those two. So being a better prompter and cleaning up data. Any thoughts on those, Christina?
Yes. So I'm just going to bring up some slides from other presentations to talk about prompting. This one here, can you see that one?
Yep.
So this is a, let me just see if I can make it slightly bigger. This is a framework called the went the wrong way. Where's it go? The CRATE framework from Ipsos. Those of you who are based in the UK will know that Ipsos do a lot of the election polling and so on in the UK, and many, many other things as well. And they have their own in-house bespoke AI tool that helps them do some of this work. And they've come up with the CRATE framework for effective prompting. Mm-hmm. CRATE stands for character, request, example, adjustment, type of output, and extras. I always use the analogy, well, I use my son as an example. If I said to my son, he's 18, he's just become 18. If I said to him, go and do the washing, okay, I probably wouldn't get the outcome of my big pile of laundry washed in a good way. If I said to him, sort the washing and then do the washing, then he might sort it in a way which was not optimum to getting the washing done in the best way. He would probably sort the washing according to who the washing belonged to. So he'd make a pile of his washing, a pile of my washing, a pile of his dad's washing, and a pile of his sister's washing, and he'd probably wash his own stuff first, and he probably wouldn't get around to washing his sister's stuff. Okay, if I said to him, sort the washing by colour, dark and light, then I'm getting closer to getting to what I need. Okay, so the idea of prompting is to be specific, okay, and treat the large language model like I might treat my teenage son if I want my washing done. Okay, remember, it doesn't know anything. Okay, you've got to be very specific. So this is one framework for helping us to think about that. There are some other frameworks. Most of the qualitative software programs talk about effective prompting on their website. So CoLoop is one of those new online apps. Even if you don't use CoLoop, they've got some really excellent resources on their website. There is a blog on the CAQDA site about chatting with your data and things like that. So we are starting to see more and more advice. There's all kinds of courses around prompt engineering, as it's called technically, but they tend not to be oriented around our needs as qualitative researchers. So I would seek out the resources which are written for and by qualitative researchers, because prompting in qualitative research is very different from other types of prompting. So those are a few examples.
Great, thank you, super. And have you come across any situations in which you've seen people use it for cleaning data?
I've heard about cleaning in a lot of examples, mainly in more quantitative spaces, I think. But I've also heard quite a lot. I'd be interested to see if others have got experience of this. Quite a lot of examples of it not doing it very well, and you having to check it. It depends what you mean by cleaning, but so I think about data cleaning in a variety of different ways, depending on what the nature of the data is. But you can upload data of any type in and ask the model to clean it up by giving it instructions for how to do that. But whether it will do it reliably always is something that you're going to have to check. So it might be that that's not actually going to save you very much time, and it might not do it accurately. But I think those sorts of things are getting better.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much. Two more short sort of technical questions, and then we'll talk about some sort of larger issues as well. So what kind of AI add-ins are we seeing in existing reference managers? So you early in the presentation, you were talking about different spaces in which with different capabilities and where we're seeing it, and you talked about how it's being integrated in existing reference managers. So just a little bit of an example maybe around that, and then whether you know of any tools for transcription that can really help with managing materials from non-Western languages or a variety of accents. So AI in reference managers and accents.
So in reference managers, it's things like using AI to find literature, to summarize literature, that sort of thing. So some of the capabilities that I mentioned in the talk in relation to qualitative analysis, but not as refined and as powerful as the ones that we're seeing in the qualitative software programs.
Okay, fabulous.
In terms of
accents,
yeah. Well, unfortunately, as we all know, the world is not equal, right? And therefore, transcription tools are not equal in terms of the languages and the accents that they support well at the moment. So the more dominant languages and accents are way better served than the more minority ones. I think again that's getting better. I differentiated between general purpose transcription tools like Otter AI, and there are many of them. Automated transcription tools that are part of other programs like Zoom and Teams. And then the bespoke ones, which are developed by qualitative data analysis programs. That third group, the bespoke ones, which are developed by qualitative researchers for qualitative researchers, they have more bespoke tools embedded within them. For example, pronunciations. You can spell out what a pronunciation might be of a technical term that might come up in a transcript. For example, you can ask them to transcribe the length of pauses, that kind of thing in some of them. So they tend to be more useful in that. But in terms of the accents, that's to do with the model, the underlying models that are being used, and they vary quite significantly. So it's definitely a little bit of a trial and error job, but they are, they are getting better, but they're not perfect.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. So a few discussions in the chat around being worried about confidentiality, and you were mentioning that right at the end of your talk. So data security and confidentiality, and specifics around, well, how do we know what's happening to our data when we're uploading our data? And how long does it stay there? Any suggestions for researchers when they're trying to be kind of careful about that?
So you definitely have to investigate that in a great amount of detail before you decide to upload data that has any kind of level of sensitivity, and I would say any kind of participant data. If it's data that you're gathering from the internet, almost certainly it's part of the training data in the models in the first place anyway, so that's a different issue. Most of the the bespoke qualitative software programs that I was talking about predominantly today, they have quite a lot of detail on their websites about all of these issues, some of them more than others, and some of them handle the issues slightly differently than others, but they understand these issues, right? And the well-established CAQDAS packages that have been around for many decades, most of them, they know that this is a massive issue, and so they put in as many checks and balances and everything to safeguard the data. But at the end of the day, if NVivo, MaxQDA, or whoever says that your data is not being trained, not being used to train models, is being deleted after a certain amount of point, etc., etc. At the moment, all of those programs are using various different models. So you have to trust two organizations. You have to trust your qualitative software program. Okay, I trust them because, well, I've known them for a long time, and I also know that if they don't put in those, if they're not doing what they're saying they're doing, then that's a really major thing. They wouldn't do that, right? So I trust them. But they've got an agreement with the producers of whatever models that they're drawing on, and some of them are drawing on multiple models and sending a task to a different model based on their research of which models do which things best. And so they've got an agreement with all of those big tech companies. Okay, I trust them less, right? Those big tech companies have told the qualitative software companies, yeah, we're not going to do anything with the data. That's all fine. And I believe that the qualitative software programs believe that, but I'm less believable. I believe them less than I do. Yeah. So there's two levels of trust that we have to have here. And so for me, there are certain types of data I wouldn't use, and certain types of data that I would use. But that's a case by case basis. It depends on the project. It also depends on what the participants have said and all of that kind of thing. So it's a massive, massive issue. And I know lots of examples of organizations, IRB boards and so on, that just say, no, you can't do it. So each of us has to look into that and understand it and make appropriate decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also seeing, aren't we, the development of closed models, more in the commercial space, aren't we? Now, I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but I do think that we're going to be seeing that introduced in ways that are delivered through the bespoke packages as well. Absolutely. That for an extra cost, of course, that you can access a closed model. We're not there yet, but we may be getting there.
So small language models and closed language models that operate. So in terms of transcription, so Transana, for example, you can have automated transcription happen without your data leaving your computer. So we're definitely going to see that kind of thing happen more and more in the future. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. We also had some discussions in the chat around the way in which we report our use of these tools. So Nabil was saying, with the advent of AI, do we need a new definition of or for plagiarism. And then there was some discussion a bit further down in the chat about, well, actually, maybe it's also about how we report the fact that we've used it. So it's maybe not black and white about plagiarism, but about saying when we're using it. Insisting on applying some scholarly norms. And that also relates to something that Kyle said right at the beginning in the chat, where Kyle provided some more qualitative feedback on your questionnaire, saying Kyle's quite excited and a little skeptical. Kyle trusts, oneself, themselves, but not sure that they trust how others would use it. So do you have any thoughts about guidelines that we are seeing at the moment for that sort of report?
Yeah, so there's lots to unpack there. Let me go back here and find, because I've got lots of other, that's not what I wanted to do, sorry. Slide sorter is what I want. Where is it? Slide sorter. So guidelines. Where are my guidelines slides?
I applaud your bravery for jumping into upteen other presentations and a live webinar. I think we can all
everything.
We can all agree that
these are some guidelines which are useful, okay, but which are not specific for qualitative research, okay. So the MRS is the Market Research Society, and there's a lot going on in the market research space in this field. And these are freely available frameworks and guidance, which have some really useful stuff in them that you can draw on and adapt for our purposes. Then we've got in the UK context and also in other national contexts, there are some guidelines coming from the government or other organisations, and that's more general about generative AI. Then in the EU, we've got the living guidelines for responsible use of generative AI in research, but not specific to qualitative research, but to research more generally. So those documents are useful to draw on. We haven't got very much specific guidelines for generative AI use in qualitative research yet. But that's coming soon. So that next webinar, I think you mentioned earlier, Sarah, our next webinar, is it on the 9th of, I think it's on the 9th of October.
Double check.
I think so.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So do come along to that if you're interested in this. So Trina Paulus and Jessica Lester, who have done a lot of work around qualitative software and reflexivity frameworks and all of that kind of stuff in the past, and are really expert in the use of digital tools for qualitative research. They have developed what they're calling the merit framework, which is designed to address these issues that people are asking about now. I can see others are putting some other ideas in the chat as well, so that's really useful too. So do come along to that webinar. For me, it's to do with transparency. So we have to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, what the implications are. So that issue of plagiarism that I think you mentioned in the questioning on this topic, Sarah, one of the big issues is that we don't know what's AI generated and what's not AI generated, maybe at all anymore. It's very difficult to know. But if we don't, as qualitative researchers, report and talk openly about what we're doing and what we're not doing and why, then how can we expect anyone else to? And so I think we have a real responsibility as established researchers who have been, those of us who've been doing qualitative research for a number of years, we have got to show the way of how to do this properly. And we know how to report properly and undertake qualitative research properly outside of the use of generative AI. And we now have to talk about how to do that within that context. And I think that's our responsibility, whether we're using generative AI or not.
Yeah, so that ties into how we teach the use of it, doesn't it? Do you have you spend a lot of time delivering training? Do you have any additional reflections on teaching um, qualitative data analysis and how
Yeah.
AI coming into that has affected your teaching of qualitative data analysis?
How it's
Or what you
affected my
suggest we do?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big question. We could do another whole
Sorry.
whole hour discussion on that. So the way that I teach it, when I teach, and I think I've sort of embedded in this webinar discussion as well, is to try to encourage critical reflection on everything that we're doing. And I think that's the way that I would teach methods without using any digital tools as well, actually. So on some levels, I'm not teaching any differently than how I would before, but I have developed some generative AI specific frameworks and constructs that I encourage students and researchers who come to my sessions to think about. So one of them is what I'm calling the why, when, how, what, does framework. So asking question, why are you thinking of using generative AI at all, or the specific tool? When are you thinking of using it in the workflow? How are you thinking of using it? What you're going to gain by using it, or what the use of generative AI will contribute to your process, and then does it match your study perspective? I'm very much a believer that depending on where you sit on that methodological spectrum, those people here today who've been to my other sessions will know that I go on about methodological spectrums all the time, and I think that qualitative research doesn't just happen in the constructivist interpretivist space. But if you sit in that space, then your answer to these questions is very, very different than if you sit in another space or another place on the methodological spectrum, whether you're more of a pluralist doing mixed methods or coming from more empiricist spaces. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to any of these questions. So therefore, we have to critically reflect, each of us and as groups, if we work in teams, on what those answers are for this project. And for me, the answer for this project is different from the next project because each project has its own. So that's one of my frameworks. The other thing I'll say before I stop, because I'm aware of the time, is that we have to, one of the things I think's really helped me myself think about my own potential use or not of these tools in my own research, is to always ask myself, what am I gaining by using this, and what am I losing? And I think that you lose something by using generative AI as well as gaining something, and being very reflective about that, I think, has really helped me be able to make those decisions about when I am and I'm not going to use the tools in a particular project.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do need to wrap up very, very briefly, very shortly. But Karen has just made a really important point. Yes. So in a kind of business space, so we have these conversations amongst ourselves as researchers, but how does the presence of this then affect what others expect of us? And so I think of that sometimes as, if you're teaching in an academic institution, for example, the good practice is don't email your students on a weekend. Why? Because the rest of the faculty may not be in a position to email students on a weekend. So let's not put that as an expectation. Let's make sure that we kind of keep some boundaries and some, help each other out. So if we sort of map that onto this situation, how can we help each other to sort of manage expectations?
Yeah. And it's worth, we didn't talk about it today. I didn't mention sectors very much, but this whole issue of expectations is very much tied to sector as well. And so I see a lot more reticence in the academic sector than I do in other sectors where qualitative research happens. And so that's also relates to the schism as well. So, business contexts and government researchers are adopting AI more fully and more quickly than academics are, as far as I can see. And so that has a potential on what's going to happen in the future as well. And what the expectations are. There's lots of business expectations around. I was just reading something in the news only yesterday about the number of big companies who expect their staff to use generative AI for everything.
Yeah.
So
really complicated when we're also being asked to collaborate outside of an academic context. So yeah. Well, we do really need to wrap it up now, but thank you so very much, Christina, for a really thought-provoking session. Thanks everybody for coming along. Christina, if you have access to those very last slides, perhaps you could share them. Otherwise, I can, if that would be helpful. Just to remind people of where we're going. Don't worry, I've got it. I think.
Have you got it?
Yeah,
sorry, I'm not.
I do. No, that's all right. Except that I obviously have to share my screen.
I might be able to find it actually.
Yeah, so it was just to flag the upcoming webinar that's happening in October, and also please do get in touch.
This one.
Yeah, thank you so much. Get in touch if you have any ideas for future webinars via the link that we sent earlier. As well, and or blog posts. Kyle also mentioned that you're gathering blog posts together, so that's really exciting as well. We'll definitely be in touch with you, Kyle, to share insights, and we will see you again soon at that next webinar, hopefully, and wishing you all very, very well with the rest of your day, and a very happy weekend when it rolls around for you, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We appreciate it, and keep well, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.